Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the tactics being used by the government to prevent MPs from banning imports of foods that do not match our standards in post-Brexit trade deals. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, when it comes to post-Brexit trade, Boris Johnson have really pinned everything on a US trade deal. Getting a deal with the EU isn't better than what we had as members. It'll be demonstrably not as good as we had as members. It will be worse, but they will argue our sovereignty, stuff like that. But the deal will be worse. Getting the agreement with Japan, similarly, again with the details we've seen so far, the full thing has been published, we again know that it doesn't improve our trading arrangements with anyone compared to as members of the EU. With the United States, it is possible to sell a deal as a Brexit benefit, even if it isn't, and even the government's own figures show that it is not going to be. The EU do not have a full trade agreement with the US. They have bilateral trade agreements, but people don't involve themselves with the politics enough to actually know what arrangements exist between their country and others. People have been told, as EU members, we didn't have a full free trade agreement with the US, but we're going to get one outside of the EU, and that'll be better. And they'll just think, the US doesn't have a trade deal with the EU. Well, yeah, it's trading arrangements. It doesn't trade on WTO terms. But that's how it will play to people. But the US, of course, are batting for themselves in this. They are extremely powerful, in case people hadn't noticed, and we are not. Further, we are also desperate, which weakens our position further. So whatever is the final deal is going to be a lot closer to what the US want than to what we want. And the government have accepted that some time ago. Now, I know people will talk about the internal market bill at this point, and the clauses threatening the Good Friday Agreement would block any US trade deal. Absolutely, but that's a complete non-issue at this time. We are not getting the quick US trade deal that Johnson initially wanted. He wanted it this year. That's not happening. That has been put off until next spring at least. And the offending clauses in the internal market bill will never make it through Parliament. And Johnson knows it. In fact, there's every reason to believe he's banking on it. He claimed to his MPs that it was just a negotiating strategy, a bargaining chip that he does not intend to hold on to. So until events prove otherwise, I'll go along with that. The tactic makes an EU deal less likely because we've not acted in good faith with the EU, but it doesn't make the US one if we don't breach the Good Friday Agreement. What the US want, in fact demand, is greater access for their agricultural and pharmaceutical sectors. The pharmaceutical side of it is under the radar at the moment. This will completely collapse our NHS. There's nothing that can be done about that now. Voters didn't do anything about it when they were given the opportunity last year. They were shown the proof that the NHS was going to be chopped up and sold, and they still voted Conservative. So that is now, unless events take an interesting turn, that is what's going to happen. Doesn't matter who wins the next general election, too late. But the agricultural access, now that requires us to accept imports of food from the US that are hazardous to health. There's been yet another report on the dangerous levels of bacteria found in samples of pork and poultry in the United States. Even though we can see the results for ourselves, because proportionally, if you look at the number of people who die from the food poisoning caused by these bacteria, way more per capita in the US as compared to the UK or even the wider EU. Way more. It has, and it's been a focus on chicken products in particular that's been a talking point in the UK. The government promised to maintain food standards in the UK, but this was a deliberately misleading statement, and one that suits the US government, no matter who wins this November, because the promise means that British farmers will have to maintain high standards of food production and animal welfare. However, the government also intend to allow food produced to lower standards to be imported into the country. Absolutely fantastic for the United States. Fantastic, because not only does it mean that they can sell us the cheaper end of their market, and they won't even have to compete with British-based farms, because British-based farms will have to maintain higher and therefore more expensive standards. Double win for the US. But unlike with the NHS, Conservatives actually back farming. Sort of. Lots of Conservative MPs live in agricultural constituencies. They depend upon farming communities for their votes. Now, the agriculture bill, which went through Parliament, went through the House of Commons, and has come back from the House of Lords, has been amended by the Lords. And the amendment should mean that all food imports would realistically need to be produced to our standards. Now, quite a few Conservative MPs would like to support the amendment, along with, of course, opposition parties. It is believed that there are enough MPs to keep the amendment in. So what's supposed to happen is, it's come back from the Lords now with an amendment. So MPs in the Commons vote on that amendment. If they vote in support of that amendment, it can all pass through and be passed into law. If they vote against it, then the government has a choice. It can either send it back to the Lords, say, no, we've taken that amendment back out. Can you please just, vote for it? And the Lords can then decide yes or no. And you can just get this, what's sometimes called parliamentary ping pong happening. But that is not what's supposed to be happening. Now, I will say, before I go into that, at this point, you may wonder why the numbers should be in doubt. Why should there be any doubt that Conservative MPs who live largely in rural areas would not support this amendment? Because constituencies that these MPs are in would be completely buggered by the agriculture bill in the form that the government intends it. The reason is rather depressingly that many MPs take their votes for granted and have good reason to do so. Absolutely, supporting the US demands means screwing over local farms in this country, in their constituencies. But for a lot of those MPs, they know that even if they do that, and even if it devastates lots of local farms and there's lots of angry farmers, they'll still vote for them at the next general election anyway. Because these people are convinced that another party, especially Labour, would be even worse than the Conservatives. Even though these farms would never have been threatened by a Labour government, but there you are, that's just people for you. So the struggle for a Tory MP is as follows. They all campaigned on a Brexit platform. A Brexit without a US trade deal is going to look very weak come the next election. So they all want a US trade deal. But the US trade deal means knackering their local economy. So they don't want a US trade deal. They both want and do not want a US trade deal, which is a great way of looking at Brexit in general. They want Brexit, but they do not want the realities of Brexit. So the MPs who think that they can take votes for granted will support the government. And only those MPs who think that their local voters might switch sides at the next election would oppose the government plans for lower import standards. But the government seem to be refusing even a vote on the amendment. Normally this would be impossible. It come back from the Lords, MPs are supposed to vote on it. So how are the government blocking it? Well, they're playing silly buggers, really. The government are arguing that the amendment gives greater powers to the Trade and Agriculture Commission, which it does, and also keeps it running for longer than intended. So this was a commission that was been set up by the government under pressure from Conservative MPs. But they only wanted it, they're just paying lip service to it. It's only going to be in place for 6 months and then gone. But this bill would put it in place for years. So the government are arguing that that means it will need more funding. It will need money allocated to it. And if the amendment means more funding, then it becomes a money resolution, they're arguing, and the House of Lords is not supposed to come up with those. Now, there are some that are calling that spurious reasoning. I don't know. All I do know is they're going to block the vote on that basis. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not like a coup d'etat as such. If MPs were suitably pissed off, they could absolutely demand this inclusion. At the very least, even if they can't get the vote back on the table, they could just go, okay, we'll let it all sail through, no problem. And then the very next week, they could propose an amendment as a separate bill. It's not like they don't have the time to do it. None of this can come into effect until January anyway. And we haven't got a US trade deal yet. So realistically, we're still talking half a year or more before something needs to be done. Plenty of time to do something about it. But this is the thing about Conservative rebel MPs. They want it all done for them. They want all the effort done for them. They want the vote so that they can just walk through a door and do their job. They've shown up as voting a particular way. After all, walking through one door doesn't really take much more effort than walking through the other. They might have to get past the chief whip. That's about it. What they can't be asked to do is to organise a working coalition in the House of Commons to actually produce their own bill for a separate amendment, because that's effort. Maybe they think they can justify themselves to their constituents by saying that they tried and would have voted for the amendment, but, you know, oh, we weren't allowed. Sorry. After all, some probably want the amendment to be blocked. They just don't want the blame for it locally. So we have a situation where there's likely to be a majority in Parliament in favour of blocking the lower standard food imports, but not a majority in favour of putting any special effort into achieving it. But that's the situation at the moment. Another government fiddle enabled by Conservative backbench MPs who know what the right thing to do is, but have not got the backbone to do it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.